Morning, everyone. I thought of actually presenting a topic today that I consider to be becoming more and more prominent in our workplaces, and perhaps something that you can relate to very well yourself. My name is Pooji Silva, and I'm an ergonomics consultant for DC Victoria. A lot of my work involves looking at people's injuries, work-related injuries. And a recent survey, or actually some research I was involved in, that looked at workplace related injuries that we have dealt with over the last 10 years. And when I compared that with WorkSafe Australia related or published data, what became prominent was that more than 10%, almost 11% of all injuries resulting in what they call serious claims. Now, serious claim is a lost time injury of 1 week or more. They happen to be related to mental stress. Now, this is not just in Victoria, this is also common to New South Wales as well. And what became more interesting was that this trend of mental stress related workplace claims or serious claims seem to be increasing, especially after COVID. Now, that is something that I'm sure you might have heard or may have even personal experience, that the level of stress that people are placed under or the hazards connected to this, what is called psychosocial hazards, is on the increase. So I thought it's interesting or important to be able to address this issue through this presentation. Now, the purpose, as I mentioned, is to understand what these psychosocial hazards are and their impact on your workplace. We also want to quickly cover the relevant sections of the OHS Act of 2004. But more importantly, we want to discover practical steps for managing these hazards effectively. So, what are psychosocial hazards? You may be familiar with the idea of workplace stress, which we all face from time to time. But what about bullying and harassment? Have you ever been in a situation where you felt bullied by a colleague, a superior, or harassed? Now, that might not be verbally, it could also be in the way work is imposed on you. It could be poor job control and excessive workload that you might experience or you've seen somebody else experience. Now, this might be due to poor management on the part of the employee, but it could also be as a consequence of the way work is designed. When there is no proper procedure for example, addressing work shortages, or when work keeps coming and there is no other plan to, to mitigate that workload. Now, lack of support from supervisors and peers. Now, this is very much speaking about the culture that is within your organization that can actually lead to a person becoming burdened by work, burdened by the pressures of work, and as a result, leading to a point of burning out. Now, the OHS Act of 2004, specifically in sections 21, places the burden or the duty upon an employer to provide a safe working environment. Now, that includes mental health. There are other Safe Victoria related guidelines on psychosocial hazards. But what I want to cover in this segment is to look at a practical example and to be able to see whether this somehow connects with you and also to provide a bit of insight. Now, let's think about an employee who is in a state of burnout from excessive workload due to their particular work environment. Now, what are the symptoms? The person might see the stress in their face. You might see that they're not handling things well. They might isolate themselves. They might actually be crying. You might see them becoming absent at work due to or having sick leave. A lot of these things, symptoms, can actually help you to identify. Perhaps you can relate to your own circumstances. to be able to identify that a person might actually be going through a phase of burnout. Actions taken, apart from reaching out and being able to support the person verbally, comfort them, to be able to help them to open up, which may or may not be your role, but as a colleague, you can always provide that assistance. But at an institutional level, you can actually provide a risk assessment to identify the stresses and find ways of actually mitigating it through effective controls. Implement an employee assist program in the form of a person being able to contact a counselor, being able to provide other supporting structures to help the employee work through this phase, but more importantly, to help them actually uh, return in a state where they can actually be productive and functional. Now, this sort of a mitigation can actually result in improved health, improved productivity, and overall reduction in absenteeism. Perhaps this is something you can relate to. Now, what I have experienced, apart from a case like this, which I think is more or less simplistic, that mental health doesn't exist on its own in an isolated setting. Often it's connected to the work you do. And that work, if it happens to be physically demanding, a lot of the work that I oversee or I get to interact with, these are people who are in manual labor type of work, in warehouses, in mechanical workshops, manufacturing, and places like that, where they are under a tremendous pressure sometimes to meet work demands. As a result, which often happens, is that this leads them to a place of uh, doing things that are risky, that are unsafe, and often it results in an injury, such as a back injury or a shoulder injury that can actually be quite debilitating. But the mental health component is what precedes the actual physical injury, but often it's not recognized in that sense. So I hope this presentation at least brings that to some level of prominence. So the point being that often it is not in isolation, and it's something that needs to be recognized. So what can employers do? Apart from conducting risk assessments, as we discussed earlier, they can implement effective measures, effective controls that addresses both the mental health aspect of it that precedes an actual physical injury, or and that would mean addressing the culture, looking at training employees and managers, making them aware of those stresses, having a level of open communication that can actually bring these issues up without fear or without being ashamed. And such strategies and control measures can lead to effectively addressing this issue. Moving on, what are some of the practical tools for managing psychosocial hazards? WorkSafe Victoria provides some resources. As we discussed, risk management templates that are available through WorkSafe Victoria. There can be employee surveys to identify stresses within your organization. This can be done anonymously so that employees can be candid. Employee assistance programs. You can implement one within, or you can have access to one outside that can effectively provide employees with a way of addressing these issues before they become debilitating. And also having access to mental health training resources. You can have an external expert or external consultant come and do this and take your organization through a culture shift. So these are some of the resources. As we come to reflect and the key takeaways, It's something worth thinking, what are the stresses in your workplace that could actually lead employees to a state of burnt out or have a psychosocial related episode? It's worth even pausing this video to consider that. I hope this presentation was useful in that it provided you with some awareness as well as some practical steps in addressing this important area. Have a safe work culture, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Thank you.